Salve. That's hello in the dead language of Latin, as Jack reminds us right now. This is Paul Catalina's Top 5. Hope you guys have a great 4th of July weekend. Presented by Texas Beef House. Please use our code SICK'EM10 for 10% off of your order at texasbeefhouse.com. Top 5 groups or teams screwed by realignment. This round of realignment, I could go into one about Nebraska and Miami making great financial decisions, but poor football decisions. But let's go through this round of realignment, teams that have been screwed. Number 5, Texas A&M. They spent 12 years trying to get away from Texas, only for Texas to say, hey, we're moving in. And also, I think since they've moved to the SEC, here's what screwed them on the last thing. Nobody really knew about this nationwide before. They knew now. When I grew up, the Yell Leaders were kind of its own, separate thing. It wasn't like this. It's kind of gotten out of control. What I'm telling you is these guys are weird. They're weird. And the world kind of knows it now. Although, whoop and all. So, but trying to get away from Texas, trying to pretend like they, were something without Texas, or they're trying to go on, and they almost did it. They were almost, there's times where they've been almost there. Now, their identity is inextricably linked with Texas. It's not gonna change. Them and Texas are together forever now. There's nothing A&M can do about it. There's nothing they will do about it. They love being in the SEC, but now they have the headache that they thought they were past back. So, yes, their whole glorious plan of being away from Texas, they squandered the 12 years to try to get ahead of them, and now here Texas is back in the league. And look, nobody talks enough about how dominant Oklahoma was over A&M, but that's not good news for them either. It's not. A team that you could rarely beat coming back in. Texas is a different thing. They had kind of gotten the Texas rivalry to where it was on, from about 1985 on to the end of the Big 12, it was way more even than it was before. They were trading back and forth winning streaks. So in the modern era, it was a lot better than it was back in the old days. But we don't know how that's going to be when they restart it once again. Number 4, Wazoo and Oregon State. Now, this could very well be number 1, but I kind of wanted to build up to a couple things on this. Wazoo and Oregon State obviously left out in the cold. Nobody wanted them. They were complete victims of the rest of the Pac-12 being too egotistical or not really seeing the forest of the trees, and quite honestly, their own hubris as well, especially on the part of Washington State that I think thought that things were going to go a certain way. But even still, they're just out there, and nobody wants them right now. And they're out in the cold. They have to hope for other things to fall apart for them to get an opportunity. But if those other things fall apart, that opportunity isn't as good as it would be. So say Florida State and Clemson leave the ACC in the next year or two, right? Okay, well, if nobody else leaves in that very unlikely scenario, that it's just Florida State and Clemson, and they say, well, look, we'll make the West Coast part of the ACC, and we'll add Wazoo and Oregon State, we'll keep our contractual obligations to ESPN, we'll keep our numbers the same, fine. But guess what? Now they've joined a conference that has less value than the one they need to. Now, granted, it's an upgrade, but still, they're going to be caught out in the wilderness because the ACC will now be the conference that gets crapped on more than anybody else, because the powers that be nationally, the people, the talking heads will be like, well, the 2 elite teams left. In spite of the fact that the new conference is the new conference, just like the Big 12 is, you have to judge things on their now, not their before. But they've been screwed because now they're just out in the cold. Obviously, maybe number 1, but I kind of wanted to do a little build up here on a couple of different things you might not have thought about. Number 3, the rest of the ACC as we go into that. So say this guy and this guy drop out. Well, then that could mean that this guy and this guy drop out. And probably this guy too. But where does that leave Wake Forest? Where does that leave Syracuse? Where does it leave Stanford, who nobody wanted except the ACC in their desperation? Where does it leave SMU, who fought and clawed to get back to this point? Where does it leave all of them? Some might get invites to otherwhere. How do they react as a conference together when chaos hits? So even though the ACC is together right now, realignment and the 33 teams that have moved conferences since Texas and OU made their announcement 3 years ago has affected them greatly. And not just in a positive way of adding more teams, in the fact that your two biggest dogs don't want to be there anymore and will find their way out. So the rest of the ACC screwed by realignment. And that's, I know, a cynical way of looking at it. Maybe it works out great for them. I hope it does. I, for one, didn't really want to see Florida State and Clemson leave. I would rather them try to make the conference better, but, you know, money is what money is. Any G5 team hoping to move up? Yes, this is Oliver Twist going, please, sir, I want some more. And getting denied. But any G5 team hoping to move up now, it's going to be really tough. First of all, Wazoo and Oregon State probably are at the front of that line because they were already G5 teams. So if you're USF, Boise State, or Memphis, who I think would be the next three in whatever order you want to put them in, San Diego State, so those four, well, now you got two other teams in front of you, and you have to make compelling cases that you're better than teams that were already power conference teams. And how big can leagues get before they decide, like, well, we're just not taking any more people? We have who we want. As a matter of fact, even though some leagues like the SEC and Big Ten may expand, I think in a future wave of realignment, they will contract and they will get rid of the people who aren't helping them that much, which then screws teams like Vanderbilt, Rutgers, Indiana, like those schools that aren't, bringing them football numbers could be left out in the cold. And again, this is probably off in the future, but again, if TV ratings are going to drive this thing, that's what's going to happen. And number one, anyone who worked at the Pac-12 Network. You spent 12 years, 15 years, however long it was, building this thing up, fighting with cable carriage. DirecTV would never carry you, doing all this work. And look, I've not really seen much from the Pac-12 Network because I was a DirecTV subscriber, so I never had it. But from what I saw, they did a pretty good job of the stuff that they did, but it was too ambitious of a plan and didn't really have it baked in. And we found out from Bob Thompson, former president of Fox Sports, that, they offered the Pac-12 the same deal that they offered the Big Ten, and the Pac-12 said no. So anyone who happened to work there that wasn't in charge of it, just if you were a producer, line segment guy, audio guy, cameraman, salesperson, sorry about your luck. This really screwed you, and the people who created you screwed you the most. But realignment screwed anyone who worked at the Pac-12. There's no test patterns like this anymore, right?
I don't really see them very much.
No, there's not. This is also, back in the day, how people used to try to watch softcore pornography. Occasionally you would see something. Just saying. That's neither here nor there. It just was a memory and it happened. So I leave you with that on into your weekend. God bless America. God bless all of you. Have a great and safe 4th of July weekend. We're wrapping it up right now.